Hey everybody, let's process a flexible scope in a 2-basin sink. So the 2-basin sink is really the typical way of processing a flexible scope. It's the right way to do it. You'll have one sink that's going to be for your soapy water, and then the other sink is going to be your rinse sink. So first and foremost, always, is your leak test. Always remember to leak test your scope. Nothing happens without leak testing your scope. So you're going to angulate in both directions just to see if you get any excess bubbles. You're going to get bubbles in scopes, but it should be big bubbles, and that should just be from gas and air from the procedure during the room. But if you keep getting constant string of bubbles, like tiny string of bubbles that never seem to end, that could be that there is a hole inside of the scope. So once you've cleared the scope that there aren't any bubbles, there aren't any holes in the scope, you're going to turn your leak tester off, release pressure, and disconnect the scope from the leak tester. If your scope does have a leak in it, you are going to keep processing the scope with the leak tester on. You're going to do the whole function while the leak tester is on. Now moving forward, we're going to add enzymatic to our sink, and we're going to put our scope back into the sink. Once the scope is in the sink, the enzymatic's in the sink, and you are going to start to wash your scope. We always start from the cleanest part of the scope and work our way to the dirty part. So the cleanest part of the scope is the part that gets connected into the processor. That's the part that doesn't even touch the patient's body, or most of the time, even the surgeon doesn't even touch the connector. It depends. Some places they do. Now you're going to make your way around the scope. Most sponges are impregnated with enzymatic, so it's good to kind of cuff the scope and glide it around the scope. That way, every part of the sponge is touching every part of the scope. Well, the sponge itself is touching every part of the scope. Once we've reached the distal tip of the scope, we are going to finish washing, and then we are going to dispose of our one-time use sponge. Next, we move on to brushing. First thing we're going to do is we are going to send the small end of our brush straight through the scope. It's going to go from the scope channel and go straight to the suction channel of the scope. And we do this underwater. The function is happening underwater. So as we push through, we push until that tip comes out through the suction tip. Once it comes out through the suction tip, we're going to visually check it as well as physically check it. So we're going to check it with our eyes as well as check it with our fingertips. Rub your fingertips through the brush to make sure. Then we're going to angulate, and we're going to send the brush down all the way to the distal end of the scope. Again, we're doing this underwater, so it's just gliding through the scope as we push through to the distal tip of the scope. Once it gets to the distal tip, we will check the tip of that scope to see if it's dirty. If you feel anything or you see anything, you're going to pull the brush out. You're going to clean it off, and you're going to do it again. If the brush cannot be cleaned off, you dispose of that brush and get a new brush. So now we're going to push it through again because there must have been some kind of mucus or something left on the brush. I cleaned it off, and now we're going to double check again. So now once we push it through again, do the same thing. You're going to push it through again, double check, and see if anything comes out. If nothing comes out, we know that it is now clean. If something does come out, we continue the process until the brush comes out clean. If you need, no matter how many times you need to change brushes, you change it. You dispose of the dirty brush, you get you a clean brush, and you keep moving forward. So now we've cleared it. It's clean now. So now I'm going to use the bigger end of the brush just to clean off the parameters of our channels, just the outer parameters of the channel and around the control. You just want to, run a brush through there just in case there might be something lodged in there. We get it out. Run it through the parameters of the suction port, and then we're going to dispose of those brushes. Remember, most things are one-time use. So if it's one-time use, you only use it for that one scope and you dispose of it. You do not reuse these sponges. Do not reuse the brushes because that can cause cross-contamination. So now as we move forward, we are going to add our connections on. As we add our connections on, we are not going to close the biopsy channel. And if you're using the disposable connections, you're going to lock all the ports because we're setting up for our aspiration. So what happens when we aspirate is that the scope buddy is going to suck the water in through the distal end of the scope and flush it out through the tubing, through the part of the tubing that houses the microphone. That microphone being that little piece that tends to suck up the water. That's where the water's going to come out through when you aspirate. So the water's going to be sucked in through the tip of the scope and flushed out through the connections. That is just to clear the line, because once we're doing the flushing part, it's going to do that in reverse. We are going to suck water in and push it out through the scope in order to flush out all whatever might be left in the scope. So right now we're aspirating. And once the scope buddy is done aspirating, it will let us know. Once we finish aspirating, we are going to connect our microphone back on to our tubing. Excuse me. We're going to connect it back onto the tubing. As you can see, that's what I'm doing there. And then we're going to put it into our canister with the soapy water that was filled up by the scope buddy. Now we put our connections on, we connect everything, close all our ports, and then we are going to start the flushing process. So it's going to flush clean soapy water through the scope for about 1 minute and 30 seconds, depending on how the scope buddy was set up. Some people's scope buddy is set up at 1 minute 30. Some people's scope buddy is set up at 1 minute. It's all in the discretion of the facility. After it's done with the soapy water, it's going to purge air. So it's going to push just air through the scope, just to push out excess soap before we start to rinse. So halfway through the rinsing process, I usually like to let out the water so I could rinse off my scope and allow for the sink to be clear for the air purge portion. So that's going to be the first air purge. So this is me releasing the water. This is the soapy water being released. Now, if you find while washing your scope was visibly very dirty, which left your water really, really dirty, you can empty out that water and then refill it back up and add more enzymatic to it, so that your scope is always sitting in clean soapy water. It shouldn't be dirty stuff just floating around the water. It's just, it's nasty. So you can always just refill up your sink with some clean water. So while the flushing process is happening, the scope is sitting in clean soapy water. So now, once it's done flushing, we're going to do the air purge. As you can see, it's pushing whatever excess soapy water is left. Is going to be pushed through the scope. Now, once it's done air purging, we're going to put it in the fresh, clean rinse water. So now I'm just rinsing off the excess soap that was on the scope before I transfer it into the fresh, clean rinse water. So now when it goes into the rinse water, it still stays connected, because what's going to happen now is we're going to change the microphone and put it into the clean basin of water. And a clean canister with the clean water in it. Now we're going to flush it with clean water. And that goes for anything with lumen, anything that you flush with soap, you flush it with clean water. If you syringed soap through it, you syringe it with clean water. That's all your instruments that you do like that. In the meantime, you can clean out your sink so that you can prepare for the next scope. If you're going to use sandy wipes to clean out the sink, just make sure that you account for dry time in the sandy wipes, so that you know that you give the sink time to dry so that the sandy wipes actually activate. Because if you just wipe it and then just rinse it, you did nothing. You just wasted the wipes. So now again, we're halfway through the rinse process, and I'm going to let out the rinse water so that once that process is done, the final air purge is going to come out. So it's going to force for all the excess water that's left in it before it goes into the automatic endoscope reprocessor. After the automatic endoscope, once it goes into the automatic endoscope reprocessor, it will be high level disinfected. So this is the processing of cleaning the scope at the sink. So after the rinse, the final rinse cycle is the last air purge. After the air purge, it could go into the automatic endoscope reprocessor to be high level disinfected. And that's how you process a flexible scope in a 2-basin sink. I hope this helps. Have a great day.